give us meaningful Torah that we can apply to our lives, grow from this experience that we are involved with. This is going to be a 4-part series on Passover. I think everybody's going to be probably as prepared as they've ever been for the Passover Seder. No excuses this year. But it really does give us an opportunity to understand this tremendously important holiday. It actually has a lot of confluence with what we're going through, as we're going to see. I'm sure other speakers have mentioned it, but I will as well in my own little take on the holiday. But when I usually give this talk, I ask people, what is the holiday in the first month of the year? And most people, it's a bit of a trick question, but most people say, oh, Rosh Hashanah. And I say, no, trust me, it's not Rosh Hashanah. It's for another time, because the holiday in the first month of the year is Passover. The first month of the Jewish year, very strangely, if you didn't really know this, if you didn't read the Torah closely, you wouldn't even know it, because you'd think that the first month of the year would really follow Rosh Hashanah. The Rosh Hashanah is the new year. So the first month must be Tishrei, which is like September. But in an interesting quirk in the Jewish calendar, it's not that way. And even though the New Year is in September, our calendar starts in Nisan, which is the month when Passover happened. And it's no accident, because the birth of our nation actually happened Nisan. So really, the Jewish religion starts then. After we got our freedom from Egypt, we became a nation and got the Torah at Mount Sinai. So really, Passover is the first holiday, the first national holiday, and probably the most foundational holiday in a lot of ways about the fundamental concepts of our religion. But it's interesting, if you ask somebody what Passover is about, everybody will pretty much say the same thing. It really is about freedom. I mean, that's when we became free in historical terms. But the influence and what we're trying to rediscover and experience every year is the ability to go free in our own lives. And that's why this holiday too has resonated not only with the Jewish people, but really all over the world, even with Gentiles. The Black experience in their Gospels, go down Moses. They were very enchanted with the story of the Jewish people, because we were the first religious redemption to freedom. Now, it's interesting, because if you think about it, freedom is a very man-centered concept. It's a very contemporary concept. That's why it resonates so much in our contemporary world. But it's not such a religious concept. I would think that Passover, being that first holiday, would be a little bit more God-centered, not so much man-centered. It might be about our service to God, but it's quirky that it really isn't. It's about this thing called freedom. Now, it's fascinating that this is the first lesson that God teaches us. And I remember when I was growing up, when I went to college, I didn't really know that much about Passover, other than it had a lot of rules, regulations, a lot of symbolism. And when I was off college, my freshman year, I was at Dartmouth College. It wasn't a very Jewish place, and they didn't give us off for Passover. I remember going in to the dining hall, and the only reason I think I even knew it was Passover, this tells you how far I was at the time, was there was this table, and I subsequently, tongue in cheek, referred to it as the Jew table. It was a Jew table set up, and the Jew table had like matzah, stacked up, and it had hard-boiled eggs, and there was some Gold's horseradish, and there was, if I'm not mistaken, the gefilte fish in the jars, the glass, jars which have the jelly in it that looks like phlegm, like that. That was what I saw, and it was Passover. And I have a twin brother. My brother went to college with me, and he kept going to the Jew table every day. He went to the Jew table, and he got matzah and everything. And I said to him, Mitch, I said, I understand, you eat matzah on Passover, and we usually have it at the Seder, one night at the Seder, but aren't you taking the symbolism a little too far? I mean, it's only really, what's Passover? It's only a commemoration of something that happened so many years ago. I would think just a little symbolism, it's quite enough, but little did I know that Judaism is not about commemorations. We don't commemorate historical experiences. We relive them. In fact, all Jewish holidays, we understand on a mystical level, there's a spiritual influence that comes around, almost like a train that comes around a track in a circle. It comes back and it docks, and it stops in that spiritual influence. The influence happens to be, at this time of year, freedom. Now we see it beautifully in the physical world because the whole world is breaking free from the shackles of the winter. There was kind of a mini death in the winter, ice, and all the leaves fell off. All life kind of stops and goes into hibernation. And the world right now is breaking free. Even we have this expression, spring fever. People want to get out, want to do things, want to move and go. This is the time of year that we're getting into now. So the world is breaking free, and there's a spiritual corollary to that as well, breaking free. Now, freedom is one of those things that in Judaism, as I was learning over the years, there's a lot of Torah about it, and there's a lot of kind of definitions or ideas very much associated with freedom. And usually when I learned Jewish concepts as I was getting more religious, what struck me about so much of Judaism is that the Jewish definition usually was very much in concert with what every man felt something was about. Love, what life is really about in the Jewish context. What the Jewish answer was, typically, if you asked every man, they would kind of line up. And that gave me a lot of comfort when I was becoming religious, because you see, a true religion is going to be a religion which lines up with what you intuit and what everybody else on the planet intuits. You shouldn't have to fetch the concepts if they're true. But freedom kind of like bothered me, because some of the ideas I would hear would be things like freedom is the ability to actualize your potential, or freedom is the ability to serve God. Another idea that I heard about freedom is that there is no free person unless he's really immersed in Torah. Some people said that freedom was the ability to do what's right or to do what's true. Now, all of these, and then one other idea that I often heard was, usually we think freedom from responsibility, like throw the shackles off. And Judaism is like, no, that's not real freedom. It's freedom to actualize your potential, freedom to assume responsibility. That's what a really free person does. But it bothered me because when you kind of look at all these definitions and these ideas, if you asked any person, any human being, anywhere on the planet, and you ask them, who is a free person, they would say a derivative of the following. A free person is someone who can do what they want without any external or internal hindrance. Nothing can hold them back from doing what they want. That's a free person. And that's what resonates with all of us. So I was bothered. Why aren't the Jewish definitions lining up that kind of simply with this everyman definition of freedom? And I thought about it because I knew there had to be an answer to this. As I thought about it, I realized that there are two very simple questions, but incredibly deep and fundamental, that can confuse our answer to this question. So, of course, freedom is to do what you want to do, but you first have to know who you are, and you have to know what you want. If you know who you are and you know what you want, you have the ability, you can get into the arena of trying to become free, trying to unlock yourselves from things which hold you back. Now, those questions might seem simple, but they're in essence very deep, because there's a universal confusion in the world over who we are. I'll illustrate it with the following story. Really, it was a true story. I had a friend at Dartmouth that ended up becoming a model. While the rest of us went to Wall Street and we were, cutting our teeth, working 60 to 80 hours a week, he was making an incredible amount of money as a model. Very good looking guy. He was on the football team as well, and smart guy as well. And he didn't last a year in the profession. And we asked him, why didn't you last a year in the profession? He said something very fascinating. He said that I couldn't deal with everybody relating to me purely as a pretty face. In other words, they related to him totally as a physical body. And it pointed out to him that the kind of the dichotomy, because that isn't who he was. He wasn't a physical body. Yes, he has a physical body, but he has brains and he has a personality and he's sensitive and caring and he can transform himself and he's a growing person. How could you relate to me kind of on such a surface physical level? And he learned a tremendous lesson at a very young age, at 22, that a person is a combination of a body and a soul, and he really is a soul. He's a soul clothed in a body. It might be a good-looking body. It might be a body that people pay a lot of money for, but it's a soul clothed in a body, nevertheless. Now, if a person is confused and thinks they're a body, they could be pursuing a soul pleasure, but feel enslaved because they identify with the body. On the other hand, if a person totally identifies with the soul and they are trapped doing physical things, they might kind of be free to do physical things, but they might feel a slave as well. And let me give you a couple of examples to underline this. So say you want to eat healthy, right? And you have a choice. Am I going to, eat that chocolate cake? Am I going to pig out, or am I going to keep to my diet, to achieve my long run goals of being healthy? Or if I'm an athlete, to get in shape, to make that weight, to be able to get that edge on the court. What am I going to do? So if I identify totally with my body and the cravings of my body, even if I hold to my diet, I'm going to feel oppressed. I'm going to feel like a slave. I'm going to feel like someone who's being denied my very essence. But if I have in mind my higher aspirations, which I think is very much related to my soul, my aspirations of what I want to be, what I want to accomplish, kind of my long run true desires, then when I don't eat the chocolate cake, I can actually feel an incredible sense of empowerment. The difference between empowerment or freedom and slavery on the same action is merely what I identify myself with, what I most clearly identified with, my body, my soul. How about your husband or your mother asks you, take out the garbage. Can you do this for me? Can you do that for me? And we all know this. We all understand this voice. And we look at that two ways. If we're coming from our body side, our physical, selfish side, don't leave me alone, don't bother me, I'm kind of, very self-centered, that side of a person, we're going to feel oppressed by having to follow what mom or what your wife wants. You're going to feel like, the proverbial ball and chain is walking you around the room. No matter what, she keeps asking me this and that. But on the other hand, that I identify with my soul. And what's really important to me is that relationship between my wife and I, that intimacy, or perhaps I'm really recognizing how much she does for myself and for the family. And then I want to pay her back. I want to show my gratitude. I kind of want to bring us together and I feel a sense of love. It can be very liberating. I can basically jump to say, honey, what can I do for you now? Can I take out the garbage? Can I do something else? It all depends on where you're identifying. And we shift. All of us shift from moment to moment. But it's good to know where you're shifting, that sometimes we identify with the body, sometimes we identify with the soul. Another example, I saw this very much on Yom Kippur. Say a woman, usually goes to work and she wears makeup, and it takes her quite a bit longer than a man to get dressed in the morning. And if a woman really associates with her body, like that is really who she is, her looks, her physicality, it would probably be very difficult to go a day without makeup. She'd be mortified to go out of the house without makeup. Imagine if someone really identified with their soul. It might be very freeing not having to deal with the body, not having to make that body up one day a week. It might be very, very freeing. That's actually on Yom Kippur, we say that Yom Kippur is about a day of the soul. Like, don't be enslaved by your body. These are three examples where if we identify with our soul, if we identify with our body, is going to cause us to be free or to be enslaved. So obviously, the idea is that we're trying to more and more identify with our aspirational self, our essence, which we would call our spiritual side, our soul. It's our aspirational sense. It's that part of you when late at night I asked you, what do you really want out of life? And you tell me. That's the aspiration of the soul. everybody would tell you that's really over the long run what you want to identify with. Now, we have to know the ABCs of how the soul works, the power of the soul to get on top of it. And the soul really, in its essence, is created in the image of God. B'Tselem Elokim, we say. In God's image, we were created. And that image, the commentators say, is that we are creators and have free will, just like God. God creates and God decides, so too we decide. Now, 24/7 in our lives, we have this free will power. It's with us always. So what is free will? And how can we use it and maximize it so that we can actually achieve the aspirations of our soul, our higher aspirations? So free will is the choice between doing what we feel like doing and what we want to do. Now, it might seem pedantic, the difference, or semantic, rather. What we feel like doing, what we want to do. Rabbi Weinberg, the former Dean of Aish Torah, may he rest in peace, used to say it makes all the difference in the world. What you feel like is what you want to do now, often associated with something physical, and very short run is the pleasure. I want to eat that chocolate cake, right? It's physical. I want it now. It's only going to last the pleasure a little bit of time. What do I want to do? I want to do something real, long run, which involves probably using my seichel, using my intelligence a little bit, perhaps maturity, to get something really worthwhile whose pleasure lasts a long time. It's the healthy person over the immediately gratified person. It's the person who has a rigorous training schedule and diet to try to win a gold medal in the Olympics. That's what I want to do versus what I feel like doing. And most people, when you ask them about free will, they have this vague notion that free will is about probably making choices to do things that are meaningful, or to choose good over evil. And when you ask a person, how many choices during the day do you get to do things that are really meaningful? And how many times do you get to do things that are anything to do with good and evil? I mean, I think if a person has 6 really meaningful moments a day, or 10 meaningful moments, that's a pretty awesome day. Yet we have this power to make choices, and we're making them 24/7. So shouldn't free will be something that's a little more consistent, a little more, all-encompassing in terms of life? So the Torah gives an amazing definition of free will. In one of the last parshiot, Nitzavim, it says, I place before you life and death, good and evil, blessing and curse. B'charta b'chaim, choose life in order that you will live, so that you will live and your children after you. B'charta b'chaim, choose life so that you will live. The choice in life, free will, is framed in the Torah not as good and evil or meaning and meaningless. It's framed nothing else than life and death, which is a really fascinating kind of definition. Wouldn't necessarily have thought of that, because really, how many of us are really choosing death in this world? But what the Torah is saying is that life is a choice. For you to really be quote unquote alive, you have to choose life. You have to be engaged in life. In other words, if you don't engage, if you don't choose life, you could be a walking dead man. A walking dead man. Such an interesting idea. So really, the choice of life is like Shakespeare said it best, to be or not to be in Hamlet. To be or not to be engaged or to be disengaged. Now, if you think about it that way, every single moment of our lives, we have an ability really to be engaged or disengaged, to be full of life, to be a little less full of life, to have a little death in our lives, with it just about asleep on a hammock with a pina colada. It's very good for half an hour. But imagine life was all about that. We have a word for that in Judaism, or our society rather. A word for that is comfort. Comfort is the choice to really disengage, to get rid of all the pain in life, and to just kind of hang out. It's like to sleep. as Shakespeare said, perchance to dream. The big sleep is called death. So the idea of full disengagement is death. In our terms, it would be comfort. The price for real pleasure in life, on the other hand, the price is struggle. The price is fighting. The price is growth. So engagement versus disengagement is all about this struggle between what I feel like doing, which is comfort, mentioned before, what I feel like doing, the comfort food right away, or what I want to do, the growth, the struggle, the aspirations. And that's free will. And that's the free will battle. Each of us in life, each of us has our own struggles. Some of us have struggles with our diet, with drinking. Some of us have trouble with anxiety. Some of us have trouble with anger. We all have our own free will struggles, and they're all different. So 2 pieces of advice before we're going to move on from free will to freedom. 2 pieces of advice, how we can get on top, become more master of our free will. And then we'll have a shot at freedom. So two possibilities. First, you have to basically diagnose, what are my free will struggles? What are the things I feel like doing versus what are the things I want to do? I feel like eating the chocolate cake. I want to be healthy. I feel like going to the party Saturday night. I want to study for the chem test because I want to get into medical school. I feel like snapping and being short with my mother when she talks to me about something I don't want to talk about. But I really want to be patient. My long run desire is to be patient. So these are my free will struggles. Maybe each one of them has half a dozen at most essential free will struggles. And know the struggle so you don't get ambushed. Understanding what you feel like doing, what you want to do is like an early warning system so you don't get ambushed. So you can start getting on top of this battle between what we call the body and the soul. Now, the body's great, but we want to take the passion of the body, the verve of the body, the energy of the body, and we want to use it for the dictates of the soul. It's like a candle. When you take a candle, the wax is like a body, the flame is like a soul. No matter what you do with the candle, no matter where you turn it, the flame is always up. The flame, the soul, always wants to go to heaven. So our job is to use that power and that energy of the wax and let it aid the flame going up. That's the perfect harmony between the body and the soul. We love the body. We're not denigrating the body. We want to be fit. We want to enjoy physicality. The Torah tells us to be physical. The Torah tells us to enjoy. We're not ascetics, but we want to channel it at the right time, with the right people, in the right measure, and in the right ingredients. 2 pieces of advice, though, beyond just the definition of free will, that can really help us out an awful lot. Much of our life happens to go on autopilot. We've made decisions, many, many years ago. Sometimes we make decisions recently, what we're going to eat, how we're going to drive, what we're going to do when we get in the car, which radio station we're going to play. And we become habituated to those decisions. And we rarely check in on the decisions, some of them that we made decades ago. I remember Kirk Douglas, who just passed away, in his book, The Ragman's Son, which was, bestseller. He was starting to question his mortality when he survived the helicopter crash where 2 younger men died, and he survived. And he was thinking about his Judaism, and he realized that he had a negative impression of Judaism because of the binding of Isaac, that story, the binding of Isaac story, which he learned as a 14-year-old, and it turned him off. He was about 75 at the time. So for 61 years, he didn't revisit not only the story, but the entire religion. And he thought to himself, that's ridiculous. And he started becoming a much more religious and a much more spiritual person till the end of his life. And he learned Torah every week. Now, so just by looking at how much of our life is on autopilot, we can gain a lot of these areas of potential free will that we really have lost. It's almost like we're reviving the dead. Many areas of our lives, we don't even have free will on because we just kind of go on autopilot. An extension of this idea is social conditioning. We live in a society we're socially conditioned to believe many things by our family, by our schools, by our rabbis, and by our democratic system. Freedom, democracy, individual rights, All of these ideas make up the fabric of who we are. And I don't mean to say in any way you should throw them out, but the goal should be to make those ideas our own, whether they be religious ideas, whether they be ideas we got from our family, whether they be ideas we got in our schools or in our society at large. Make them your own. If they're good, they're mine. If they're not good, let them go. In so doing, these two areas give us a huge playing field to operate with our free will. Okay, so the next step, I would say free will is like a spark, and freedom is the flame which comes from the spark. Because freedom is the ability to be able to do what I want to do. So free will is knowing what the decision is. It's potential. It's knowing what I want to do versus what I feel like doing. But there are many different things which stand in our way, which block us from doing what we want to do. Those are the things that bind us. Those are the things that enslave us. I remember when I was, growing up, when I would go to the Seder and I would, read the story of our ancestors enslaved in Egypt. I didn't really relate to it that much because I wasn't enslaved in Egypt. I wasn't in jail. We were in a very free country. I found it was a very difficult story to relate to. And then I realized that physical enslavement is just the tip of the iceberg. There's so many things that hold us back in life. And the truth of the matter is, in almost all cases, I think I can safely say this for all human beings, the greatest, most powerful jailer is really ourselves, because we hold ourselves back in so many emotional, psychological, and spiritual ways. And when you realize that the depth of freedom is to break out of your boundaries, the things that hold you back, and the story is a template, it really allows us to really resonate with it. And I think now, in this world we're living in the last couple of weeks, a lot of the externals are out of the picture. And we really are enslaved in a certain way. If I asked you, are you free? Are you a free person right now? You'd have to think twice, because on one level, you're not free. If they make a quarantine and you're not allowed to go out of your house, on some level, your freedom is impinged. But on the other level, you are free, because you're free to be who you want to be, to respond how you want to respond, to change your internal appreciation and understanding of what's going on around you, to increase your sensitivity to others, to engage with others. There's so much that you have that makes you free. When you ask this to a refusenik, and you see, the early refuseniks in Russia really resonated with the story, and they would smuggle in, on Hanukkah, they would try to smuggle in oil to make a Chanukiah, and they would smuggle scraps of a Hagana to say the Passover Haggadah during Passover. They would do anything to make a little bit of matzah. And you ask a person in America who's so totally free, is this refusenik free? And he would say to you, wow, that's an interesting question. On one level, he's not free. He can't get up and walk out of his Siberian cell. On the other hand, he's probably more free than I am. So that's the freedom we can taste now and experience in our quote unquote quarantine, a soulful freedom, which we could probably make greater strides than perhaps we're out there walking around with our arms and our legs with a semblance of freedom. So what does the soul want? We asked two questions before. You got to know you're a soul, and you got to know what you want. What does the soul want? So as I mentioned, the soul is aspirational. It wants kindness. It wants love, courage. If I asked you, I usually ask people what these, and they shout them out. Achievement, persistence, hard work, growth, creativity, sacrifice for good, patience, peace, wisdom, relationship, loyalty. You're going to add in your superlatives. Wow, that would be pretty amazing. They're all incredible aspirations. Now, a free person is one who's able to access all of these things without hindrance. So what keeps us enslaved? And I would say it's buying into the illusions of life. There are illusions that the world presents to us, and there are illusions that we present to ourselves. Let's take a look at an analogy for where most of our illusions in life come from. And I call it's the bakery window analogy. If you go to a bakery, any bakery in America, and you look in the window, there are beautiful cakes and turnovers and rolls and loaves of bread, just beautiful. And you go out there, you're salivating, and you kind of you want everything. You want to buy all the baked goods in the store. You go in, you buy your selection, you bring it home, and you're all excited. It's like Pavlov's dog. Your mouth is starting to water, and you cut a piece of the Black Forest cake, your favorite, and you bite into it, and it just doesn't give you the bang for your buck. It advertised, it sucked you in, it promised you, it beckoned you that it had all this potential to offer you. And the return on your investment was lacking. Now, we have a bakery. I live in New Jersey. We have a bakery up in Teaneck, New Jersey called Zadie's. Now, when you go there, you get exactly what you pay for. It's unbelievable. But most of the time, when you go into the bakery window of life and you invest your money and you invest your kishkas and you invest emotions in things you desire and things that you really want, and the advertising industry stokes those desires to kind of an out of control level. And what you do is you have only a certain amount of money. Imagine you have monopoly money, only a certain amount of money to spend in life. And you got to allocate it to things which you're going to hopefully get a return on investment. The problem is we get sucked into the bakery window. Now it's fascinating because the holiday of Passover revolves around chametz and matzah. Chametz is the bakery window. We're told, get rid of it. For 7 days, get rid of it. It's poison. Get it out of your houses. Don't partake in it. Don't eat of it. Don't eat any of it. What are you supposed to do? Back to matzah. What's matzah? Matzah is flour and water without the additives, without the sugar, without the puff, without what it grows to. It's essential bread. It's all value. It's dense. You eat the matzah, it fills you up. No fake out. No fake out, no illusion. So what the Torah is telling us is that you have to almost detox, pull back from the world of illusion, the world that's sucking you in, the world that year after year, day after day, commercial after commercial is trying to get your attention, get your dollars, get your emotions. The worst thing, though, is it gets your time and attention. It veers you off course for what really matters and what really counts. Pesach, Passover, is about getting back to value. It's not the new sexy stock. It's the Warren Buffett approach. It's the value orientation of investment. What's really, really important in life. And it's very interesting because you can approach cleaning this way. Now, I don't clean, thank God my wife is unbelievable. She does most of the cleaning, but I go and do my office, I do my closet, I do as much as I can. And I find it incredibly liberating in a way because I get to analyze and reconsider the purchases that I've made throughout the year. And I'll go and I'll take a look at those shoes that I bought, and I wore them once. Why? Because they're too tight. I always buy shoes that are too tight. I've got a problem. I've got a disease. My wife actually refuses to let me go buy shoes anymore alone. And whenever I look at those shoes, I'm in pain because I didn't get any value for that investment. Now, there are certain things in my closet, like the threadbare blue blazer that I love and I finally have to get rid of, that it gave and it gave and it gave so much more than I even ever put into it. And when you go through your different purchases are just kind of a catalog of your choices, what you put yourself in, the gym membership that you're ashamed you bought because you used it twice. The famous joke that when they look at you, me in terms of the gym membership, I'm profit, pure profit. Because, you don't get into the gym, you don't use the equipment. It's very embarrassing. It's very, very painful. The idea of Passover is to really, really reanalyze what is value and what's holding me back. So in the physical world, the illusion is to pull back from all those things that have got me out of whack, all those things that have got me away from my goals, my values. Now on Rosh Hashanah, which is 6 months, actually 1/2 a year before Passover, it's like bookends. Rosh Hashanah is about free will. Passover is about freedom. Rosh Hashanah is about cataloging what's important to you, what you have to do to come back to you, who you are, what counts in life. Now, once you get out of Rosh Hashanah, you're supposed to use it as a springboard to getting those things into reality. But what happens? Life gets in the way. Illusions pop up. Things get you off course. Pesach, 6 months later, is a time to retrench again, get a whole week of getting back to basics. So on the level of the world, what's holding us back is the bakery window, is the illusions that I'm getting sucked into. On the personal level and the internal level, chametz also is an analogy for what's holding us back. The rabbis say that it symbolizes a puffy person, an arrogant person, a person that's full of themselves. That's the illusion that a person creates about themselves, often to hide from the real work and the insecurity that they really possess. Arrogance blocks us from seeing what's wrong with us. It blocks us from encountering, honestly, other people. It really removes us into a world, a prison of our own. We think arrogant people are successful and they don't need anybody, and that not needing anybody is sort of almost like a powerful thing. No. It's weakness. It's a weakness because it's illusion. Arrogance is basically, it's like a room full of, imagine the room gets full of me and there's no room left for anything else. A total illusion. So there are two aspects of illusion: the bakery window and my internal illusion called ego and arrogance. That's chametz. Matzah, again, as I say, is totally the antidote. Matzah is humble. Matzah is the bread. It's called lechem oni, the bread of struggle, the bread of enslavement. It's also the bread of freedom, because getting back to the basics, freeing myself both from the external illusion and the internal illusion, that gets me free. So matzah is that double-edged sword. It's humility, but it's freedom. It's total freedom. So how do we get back to the first idea we mentioned, that it doesn't seem like such a religious holiday? It's liberating, it's contemporary. Now we have a bit of a roadmap to helping us unfree ourselves, hopefully this year. But how does that have anything to do with God? Well, the truth is, if you think about it now with the definition that we brought, if freedom is to be able to get rid of all those barriers that are keeping you from doing what you want, and what you want is really the aspirations of your soul, those are God's aspirations. What more beautiful comment than you freely and through struggle and through effort, you're basically giving almost a gift to God. Freely giving a gift to God. You're saying, I'm for your priorities. There couldn't be any more religious, any more beautiful concept. So I just want to end with a little bit about how this ties into the times we're living in now. 25 years ago, I had the great fortune to hear Natan Sharansky speak to students, a group that I was working with. And he mentioned, maybe it was before Passover, and he mentioned that when I was in the cell in Siberia, he was a refusenik, I was more free than when I walked down the street in Tel Aviv. And at first we didn't understand what he was talking about, and he explained. And he said, when I'm walking in Tel Aviv, I'm on autopilot. My life is just kind of organically going from A to B to C to D. I'm not really thinking about it. I'm not really making choices. I have the semblance, as we mentioned before, of freedom, but I'm not truly in touch with my choice minute to minute. When I was in that cell in Siberia, I was totally free 24/7. I could either give in to the Soviets, to Russia, or I could not give in. I could fight or I could submit. My free will was in front of me always. I think in a weird way, that's where we are situated as we're quarantined in our homes. Yes, the external distractions have been taken away from us. the autopilot of our lives and our schedules. But now we're forced to confront the real issues that enslave us. And many of those are personal. How do I relate to my most important family members? How do I relate to myself in terms of, am I a person really growing? Am I a person starting something new? I have so much more time now. What am I doing with that time? How am I approaching my insecurity, my anxiety? Now those problems, those issues are in front of me. Am I going to hide? I mean, it's funny. I noticed even in quarantine, you can hide. You can be on the internet. Every person can be on their phones. And it's fascinating because the last two Shabbases that I spent with my family, we had to get rid of the phones and get rid of the internet. So I felt so liberated because we couldn't run away from each other. So interesting. We love each other, but we all run away. We run away from what's difficult. We run away from those conversations we should have had so much longer ago. And I think what God has done is he set us up in this cocoon to really become free, on a spiritual, internal, psychological basis. You can't help notice the similarity to the initial Passover, because on that fateful night, when the Jewish people were redeemed, they were redeemed at 12 o'clock midnight, the Torah says, the Talmud says, 12 o'clock with the slaying of the firstborn. And the Jews were commanded, do not leave your house. Put blood on the doorposts, go in quarantine. In quarantine, we became free people. And I can't help think, wow, what an incredible confluence. Passover is coming up very soon. We can't go anywhere. We have to deal with ourselves. Imagine the opportunity that we have. Imagine how much stronger, how much freer, how much more loving, how much greater we can be as individuals and as a Jewish people because of this beautiful gift that we're having now. Yes, and there's misery out there, and it's heartbreak. Everybody who's, God forbid, passes away, and I don't want to minimize any of that, but Jews have always preferred to say, what am I going to do about it? Not why is this happening? That we might never know. But what am I going to do about it? How am I going to respond? And on that basis, and from that point of view, we have an incredible, incredible opportunity. So my blessing to everybody is that we use the opportunity. So this is the first segment of our Passover prep. Now we know what freedom, we have a definition of freedom. We know it's about doing what you want to do as the everyman concept, but you have to know who you are and what you want. And we are souls. That's our aspirations. That's who we really are. And we want to be free to do what our soul wants and to really ultimately be in concert with what God wants for us. So that's the philosophical overview. On Thursday, we're going to move to the Hagana. The Hagana is a book that, from my own history, I found very confusing. It starts and stops, and Abraham and Moses, and I couldn't get it all straight. It was choppy. It's hard to make sense of. So Thursday's class at 9 o'clock is making sense of the Hagana. I hope you'll join me, and I'll join the rest of the presentations in this 9 o'clock chizuk from Project Inspire. Good night.